business owners have to get ready for the potential legal hazards that come with the holidays or almost any time you're doing business. This morning we're talking about some of those with labor attorney Mike Mitchell, and we were going over some of the list of things that you were saying are potential landmines for employers and employees, and there's a lot of them.
There are.
First of all, let's start with the holiday parties, because that can be a problem.
Well, it is a problem potentially, especially if the company wants to serve alcohol.
And a lot of parties do, especially here in New Orleans, yeah.
Absolutely. But we have some tips about that. We certainly suggest that you not have an open bar. If you want to have alcohol, be sure you also have non-alcoholic beverages available. Always use a professional bartender. One of the worst things a company could do is use their own supervisors as the bartender.
Now, why is that?
Well, because if somebody gets overserved, let's say,
then there's legal liability.
You bet.
So if there's a professional bartender there, then it's the bartender's responsibility.
And he knows when to cut people off.
Okay.
And it's a lot easier for a professional bartender to say, no, you've had too much, than for a supervisor who's going to have to work with that person.
And does the company bear any responsibility if the bartender allows someone to drink too much or doesn't realize?
Well, sure. The company is always going to be ultimately responsible for a lot of these things, and that's why it's imperative that they try their best to keep the misconduct down. It's not wrong to have a holiday party without alcohol at all.
Yeah.
But if you
not as much fun, but it's not
no,
wrong.
that's right. We want people to enjoy themselves. But having a cash bar or a ticket system is a little bit safer than just saying, okay, it's an open bar.
Yeah. And then let's talk about sexual harassment, because we see that a lot in the news lately. Are we seeing more of it, or are we becoming less tolerant of it?
I think we're becoming less tolerant of it. I don't think it's any, well, I know it's not worse than it used to be. In fact, it's considerably better. At the time when the sexual harassment laws were put in place, it really was pretty bad. They were put in place for a reason.
And when does it become sexual harassment? Because I used to know one of your fellow attorneys who couldn't remember people's names, so he'd call every guy, hey buddy, and every girl, hey baby. Sure. When does that become sexual harassment?
You have to take all of these things in context, and the totality of the circumstances is going to be the ultimate way that you judge these things. But the real standard, Eric, is it offensive? Is it unwelcome to a reasonable person, to a reasonable woman? You don't set the standard by the most prudish person in the workforce.
And because I think a lot of times people are taken aback, because here in New Orleans, if you go to the lunch counter, there'll be somebody behind the counter, and they go, and you take the order and you go, I'll be right back, baby, or whatever, honey, or whatever.
It's who we are.
Yeah.
And that is part of the context that you take it in. Would somebody be offended by that? Well, maybe in New York City they would.
Yeah.
In New Orleans, they're not.
I personally think it's great. So, but as long as but if it goes too far, it is too far, obviously.
All right. Unwelcomeness.
And then quickly on social media issues.
Well, every company ought to have a social media policy setting out what their employees can and cannot do on Facebook or one of the other
because it can embarrass the company.
Absolutely. You want to make sure that the world knows that the person who's posting about your company isn't doing it as a representative of the company. You also want to make sure that they understand the sexual harassment rules are still in place. We don't want people to post things that are demeaning to their fellow employees.
To somebody, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. We appreciate the tips.
Happy to do it.
A lot to think about. Coming up the next